So thank you for logging on to listen. My name is Melissa Rosen. I'm here with my colleague, Bonnie Beckoff. You may be here simply to learn more, or you may have been asked to speak on behalf of Sharsheret, or maybe you're considering becoming a peer supporter. Over the past few years, the number of speaker requests that Sharsheret has received has been growing and growing, and we have such a talented core of people involved with Sharsheret in some way who've been asking to do more. So honestly, it just made sense to continue doing speaker trainings. This is actually the 4th year we are doing them. Tonight will be helpful for anyone interested in speaking to raise awareness or to support those impacted by breast and ovarian cancer or ovarian cancer. Tonight, we're going to talk about how to speak about those things. We're going to have a wonderful Sharsheret caller share her story. We're going to talk about some public speaking goals and some tips, because that's often something that makes people very nervous. We're going to talk about peer support conversations and how they differ from general conversations. I'm going to remind you about some of the amazing things that Sharsheret provides, talk about next steps, and even give you a chance to answer some questions, answer two if you'd like, but to ask some questions. So let's start with sharing a piece of yourself, because honestly, whether you're speaking in front of a group of people, at a synagogue, at a community center, at your place of employment, or you're talking one-on-one with someone to offer support, talking about this is sharing a piece of yourself. Make no mistake. And sharing your story, your connection to cancer, again, truly sharing that piece of yourself with another person or an entire audience. But you're doing it for an important reason, for sure. That doesn't necessarily mean it won't be emotional. I want to remind you, and we're going to talk about this a little bit later, that you have the prerogative to share what you'd like to share and to keep other parts private. Sharing your story, of course, can help others. But what you might not realize, or maybe you've already done this and you do realize, is that sharing your story can help you process your own experience. And that's a very healthy thing. Remember, when you're speaking to a group, the best way to share your experience is not by sharing or oversharing details. Introduce yourself, then share what happened. How did you feel? Discuss what helped you during the experience and why. Not necessarily what eased your physical ailments, but what helped you emotionally. Because your audience may be able to use your experience to help someone they know going through a similar experience. Talk about how you're different now on the other side, or how you're not different now. And then when you're speaking publicly, there's this big finale, the ask. We never speak on behalf of Sharsheret without an ask. So your ask, depending on where you're speaking and what you've asked to speak about, may be something different. It might be encouraging people to learn about their family's cancer history. It might be for them to schedule their mammogram. It might be for them to take on some healthy living behaviors. Or maybe it's to get involved with Sharsheret in some way. Follow us on social media, make a donation, plan a program, whatever it is. But now, if your conversation is not in a public forum, but with an individual, these steps will likely, of course, be different. And there's going to be a lot more to come on that shortly. I want to talk about nerves. People think that public speaking is either something you can do or you can't do. And I want to assure you that if you're speaking to a group, that is not the case. You can learn to be a comfortable public speaker. And it's normal to be nervous. But let's go through a few things. Don't expect perfection, because I promise you, your audience does not. They may not even notice. It's perfectly acceptable to stutter, to trip over a word, because you've heard me do it already a couple times tonight. This is what the average person speaks like. Just keep moving with grace and with poise. And if your conversation is one-on-one in a peer support relationship, don't always expect eloquence when sharing with another individual. You're sharing for an important reason. But again, that doesn't mean you won't misremember something or even say something that you wish you hadn't. Don't equate public speaking or difficult conversations with self-worth. Do not worry if this is not the thing you are the most talented at in the world. I promise you that people appreciate your willingness to share, and they're grateful that you've made the effort. So whether your conversation is to a group or one-on-one, reflection, prep, and practice are the keys. I've seen the most talented public speakers attempt to wing it on occasion and fail. No matter how experienced of a public speaker you are, or how familiar you are with the topic, and since it's your story, you're very familiar, jot at least an outline down. Even if you're planning for a conversation, a one-on-one, rather than a presentation, take time ahead of it to think about what you're comfortable sharing. Now, being nervous about nervousness. I talk to so many people who are like, if I get nervous, I'm really going to mess up. Okay, that's just doubling down on anxiety. So that sounds horrible. Why compound that? Let's reframe that feeling of nervousness into excitement, because that's actually really what it is. Nervousness is simply adrenaline flowing. It's a form of energy. Both are actually similar emotions, excitement and nervousness. You're unlikely to change nervousness into calm, but you can. It's much easier to turn nervousness into excitement because they're actually similar. Speaking louder, by the way, allows you to express passion for the topic. That's something that often happens when you're nervous. And sometimes it helps to actually, before you begin a presentation, say out loud, I'm excited, I've got this. Okay, so we talked about some basic things, right? Some of the reasons we speak, the normal emotions that go along with speaking. And in a couple of seconds, we're gonna talk about goals and for both public speaking and peer support conversations and ways to help in both of those things. But before we do, I am going to very briefly stop my share and ask my colleague Bonnie to come and introduce a very special presentation.
Good evening, everyone. How are you? I'm Bonnie Beckoff. I'm the Director of Support Services at Sharsheret, and it is my pleasure to introduce Shoshana. She is a caller of Sharsheret, a peer supporter of Sharsheret, a friend of Sharsheret, and we are very lucky to have her share her story, her connection as being a caller and also serving as a peer supporter. Shoshana, the floor is yours. Thank you so much for being here.
You are muted.
Oh.
Host needs to unmute you. Hold on, I'm working on it. Okay, see, nothing goes perfectly, and that's okay.
Melissa, maybe if you remove the spotlight.
I think that's what I have to do. There you go.
Okay.
Sorry about that, guys.
Hopefully you can hear me now. I'm going to take you back to November 11th, 2019. I was at home, Veterans Day. My youngest was 14 months and daycare was off that day. He was sitting in his high chair, eating strawberries. They were cut up. And my phone rang, and it was the radiologist who had done my biopsy. And he said to me, "Your nodules are tumors. Your tumors are malignant. You have breast cancer." Those 3 sentences upended my life. And it started a point in time where my husband and I had to make an innumerable amount of decisions. One of the very first decisions that we did make was that we were not going to keep my diagnosis a secret. Not only because we had kids and kids talk about everything, but we knew we needed support and help. What we did decide, though, was that we were going to keep things private. And only those who really needed to know would know. And if other people found out, they found out. And that's how we proceeded. And after that decision, we started making our lists of all the things that we needed to do and all the things that I needed to do as the patient and things that only the patient can do. On that list was call Sharsheret. I knew vaguely what Sharsheret did, but I didn't know so much, and I didn't know the extent to which Sharsheret was going to play a huge role in my journey. I know some people don't like to call it a journey. That's my preference. So I just wanted to give that caveat. So I made that first phone call. I needed peer support myself. I needed help making the decision between the 2 hospitals that I was looking at. And it's amazing because Sharsheret has this database of callers and people with experience with breast and ovarian cancer. So they can put in anything. I needed to talk to someone who was deciding between 2 specific hospitals, and they found someone for me. And that person helped me solidify my decision to go to the hospital that I ended up going to. And I am incredibly grateful for that because it was perfect for me and my journey. I then became a peer supporter at some point in my journey through cancer. A couple of years ago, I got an email, it might have even been from Bonnie, saying that she had a specific caller that she thought I might be able to help. And I think immediately I was like, I'm still going through this, and how could I possibly help someone? How could I give advice to somebody or, be that emotional support for them when I'm still in the throes of treatment? And Bonnie convinced me that I could do this. And I took a peer supporter class from Sharsheret, and I took a deep breath and I said, okay, I will give it a shot. And the amazing thing about Sharsheret is they don't just do that and they give you a phone number and that's it. They are there before and after, checking in, making sure, did the person call you? Did they get in touch? How did it feel? How do you feel? How do you think it went? Here are some tips that you can take with you the next time you become a caller. And I realized that the next time you become a peer supporter. And I realized that I could help. So I continued to be a peer supporter and speak with different women all over the United States, some nearby, some not, and everybody with a different take on their journey and what they needed to share with me and what they asked me to share with them. I got a call from Sharsheret asking me to tell my story through the Rosh Hashanah campaign. I asked for some time to think. It was a really big decision for me. Going back to that first decision that I mentioned that we spoke about, that we were going to keep things private. Putting my face and my name on a mailing is very far from private. And I really thought about it. And at the same time, around that time, a friend of mine, during Childhood Apraxia Awareness Month, started posting about what she, her son, and her family were going through, and taught all of us about that particular condition and how they're functioning and how her kid is doing. And it was the first time that she had been, Facebook public about it. I admired her bravery. I thought she was really courageous and vulnerable. And not only did I admire that about her, but she helped all of us. And she helped all of us also be there for her and be more empathetic. So I also, to help me make this decision, I really thought about my motivation. Why did I want to do this? Why was I leaning toward saying yes, which was counter to everything that I had been operating, the way that I've been operating up until then? And I thought, am I doing this because I want to tell my story and it's about me? Or was I doing this because I had, I think would say, a little bit more of an altruistic motivation, that I did want to help. And I didn't really know how I could help. And Sharsheret was getting me a way to fill that need of mine to be helpful. So I agreed to tell my story through Sharsheret. We chose pictures. We hashed through my story and my journey, which I'm happy to share anytime with any of you. But that also got me into a sharing frame of mind. And I actually have in my notes that something I want to echo what Melissa said was, throughout the interview process with Sharsheret, they made it so clear that I had control of my story. And that was very impactful. I got to choose which pictures we were going to share. I got to choose which parts of my story I keep private and which parts of my story I'm willing to share. And which parts of my story I'm also willing to share with different people. Not everything is for everybody. So that also led me to start sharing on Facebook. So I went Facebook public. And I wrote, during the month of October, Breast Cancer Awareness Month, I wrote about 1 to 2 posts on Facebook every week. And I did it through a frame of gratitude. So I focused on, every post had a different aspect of my journey. So one was about Sharsheret. So I was sharing about Sharsheret, and I was also telling people what Sharsheret was about and giving thanks to them and explaining how they helped me through my story. The same with my hospital, my medical team, my community, my family, my friends. And that led to an interview on JM in the AM, which was the first of any kind of speaking that I had done. And the interviewer, who happens to be a family friend, when she introduced me on the show, said, I booked my mammogram before we did this show because I couldn't possibly come on here to talk about breast cancer awareness without having scheduled that. And already off the bat, I had accomplished a goal of mine, which was to raise awareness and to get women who were pushing off mammograms to schedule their appointments and go. I started getting private messages from Facebook, texts, emails, from acquaintances that I hadn't spoken to in a very long time. One of them reached out because she found my story comforting, and she found it comforting that people were talking about it because her mother had passed away from her battle with breast cancer. Another woman called me because when her mother was diagnosed. One got in touch with me through a friend, and to talk about, she had found out that she was BRCA positive, and she was going for a prophylactic double mastectomy. And she wanted to talk to me about what the surgery felt like. And I was in touch with her. Turns out we had the same plastic surgeon, and we ended up meeting in the waiting room because we unintentionally had back-to-back appointments. I tell my story, which is ever evolving, and I tell everybody about Sharsheret. I do it so that everybody, men, women, children, everybody knows that they don't have to endure going through breast and ovarian cancer alone, whether it's them or their spouses, or it's a mother, a cousin, a child, God forbid. They're not alone. And that's really what I wanted to scream from the rooftops, was you don't have to do this by yourself. I tell my story in different ways, whether it's peer support or speaking engagements or social media posts or my journal that doesn't go public. I do it because there's a glimmer of hope that I could help save somebody's life. The summer before my diagnosis, I read an article in which Rabbanit Shani Taragin talked about how she found her lump, which ended up being malignant. And that was my reminder that even though I was too young for mammograms and I didn't have a family history, that a self-exam couldn't hurt. And that article and Rabbanit Shani Taragin, she saved my life because I found my lump and I found it early on. So as Melissa said, we end everything with an ask. So my ask to everybody on here and to anybody anywhere listening is share. Tell your story. Share somebody else's story that they're sharing. You can do it through speaking. You can do it through writing. You can do it through sharing somebody else's speech or their writing. You can share information that Sharsheret sends out. So if you follow Sharsheret on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, you can reshare what they're sharing. And that will also reach people. And the hope is that we can create this community where people aren't suffering alone. And hopefully together we can save lives.
Shoshana, thank you so much. Every time I hear you share your story and I hear you speak, it gives me chills. And we are so grateful for your support. We are so grateful for the peer support you provide, every gamut of support you provide to Sharsheret. You are truly a powerhouse and an inspiration and beyond grateful. So thank you so much for taking the time on a very busy evening to share your story.
Okay, we're done. We don't have to do anything else because Shoshana really covered it all. I found myself with this huge smile on my face listening to you, Shoshana. And if you take a second once we start sharing slides again to look at the chat box, all of the comments about your presentation, yeah, thank you is all I have to say. Thank you. Okay, we're going to continue. It's going to take me a second to kind of get back into it because that really was very moving. But let's continue because we do have now that we really understand why we're doing this, thanks to Shoshana, we have to understand a little bit about how. So first we're going to focus on public speaking and then we're going to focus on peer support conversations. So let's just review the goals for public speaking. Just like Shoshana said, we want to educate about breast and ovarian cancers and about genetic mutations. We want to raise awareness about the heightened risk that those of Ashkenazi Jewish descent have for some of these mutations. We really want to inspire participants to make changes, right? Like that article Shoshana read inspired her to find or to check and find a lump, and how Shoshana inspired her interviewer to make a mammogram appointment because she wouldn't dare interview Shoshana without knowing she had done that. So important. And by the way, we also want to inform people about Sharsheret as an important resource because nobody needs to go through this alone. As a reminder, you know that we provide free and where appropriate culturally meaningful resources for anyone who's been impacted. So that's not only the person who's facing cancer, but caregivers, whether they be partners or spouses, children, parents, best friends, anyone impacted. And you know what? We even want to remind people that they need to remain vigilant about their health. I toyed, I have to be honest with you, back and forth. Should I remove from last year's slides, even in the face of a pandemic? Listen, I can't tell you whether the pandemic is over now. We've all been reading articles, but what I can tell you is even if it is over, a lot of people have put off a lot of preventative care over the last few years. And even though we feel like we've been out of it for a while, I still hear people say, yeah, I've been meaning to do that. So that's important, right? We need to remain vigilant about our health no matter what else is going on in our lives. And you know what? Those are the forward-facing goals, but as speakers, we may have our own goals too. One might be to give back to the community, right? People, people who have been helped by their communities during their own experience or by Sharsheret, they want to give back. And as we both, we've mentioned a couple of times, it does help to process one's own experience. And we know that that's healthy. Sometimes we speak because we want to honor someone we know who's faced cancer. And these are just as valuable and just as legitimate goals as the ones that are on your slide, the slide in front of you right now. Absolutely. So we've talked about how public speaking makes some people very nervous. So let's talk about how we can do it without breaking a sweat. Just, some quick tips. So first, we start with preparing, right? We have to decide, do we want a written speech or do we want notes? I think ideally, at some point, having bullet points is great because it allows your presentation to be more conversational. But if you're nervous and you're not a frequent public speaker, then maybe it does make more sense to write out your speech to read, as long as you print it with a really big, fonts, point size, and with lots of white space in between. You can take some time to review your presentation with Sharsheret. We help lots of people help craft their presentations, make suggestions, provide them with talking points. And practice with a partner, with me, with yourself in a mirror. And if you do that preparation, then you're really going to be able to go up there with a great deal of comfort or a strong comfort level. Okay, now let's talk about showtime. Sometimes when people say, when you talk, don't use your hands, and I'm going to tell you the opposite, right? Again, we want this to be conversational. Nobody wants to appear stiff. So I'm going to say, use your eyes, look around the room, use your hands. It's really important. The most effective presenters connect with their audiences. You're sharing something personal, something you care so deeply about, and that makes connecting easier, actually. But like I said, some ways to connect are eye contact. Be sure to look around the room at different spots. You don't have to look at people, by the way, if that's going to make you nervous. Look at the empty chair in the back corner. Look at the picture on the wall on the other side of it. Nobody's going to be able to tell where you're looking, but they're going to connect with you as you look around the room. Another thing to do is begin by asking a question. When I do a presentation, my standard question is, by show of hands, how many of you have heard of Sharsheret before? And I always start with that. Sometimes I ask, how many of you know someone who's been impacted by cancer? I want you to do your best to speak conversationally and with intonation. Speak loudly, clearly, and slowly. So slowly that it actually sounds odd to you. And again, I'm going to tell you, feel free to use your hands. Have in mind that this is simply a conversation that you happen to be dominating. Don't think of it as a formal presentation out there. And I want to remind you at this point that the average person has an attention span of 10 to 12 minutes. No reason to go on and, longer than that unless there's some interaction or that you planned with the audience or something like that. Best to keep it short and simple. Okay, let's go on to the Q&A. Don't be, because most presentations offer that. Don't be afraid of questions. It's a great way to connect and perhaps connect people with Sharsheret. So remember the following when you're being asked questions. Sharsheret gives no medical advice or doctor recommendation. I find when I speak in community settings, people will often say, listen, my grandmother and my sister, should I be doing this? Should I be doing that? And that's not something that any of us can answer. And a reminder to them that it's best for them to connect with their own doctor or Sharsheret's genetic counselor if that's an appropriate answer. We can connect people not to doctors, but to peer supporters to hear the details of someone's experience, but not to receive those medical recommendations. Sharsheret also partners with a service that can make doctor recommendations. So if somebody is interested in that specifically, they should contact our clinical team. And if somebody is looking for an additional opinion, they should consider that second opinion. Another thing to keep in mind with Q&A is it is okay to say, I don't know the answer to that. I've done it myself. Remind the audience that Sharsheret staff is there to answer questions. If it's somebody you know or it's a particularly important question, you can reach out to a staff member afterward. We can get you the answer, and maybe whoever planned the program can share that answer either on social media or through an email to anyone who participated or whatever it is. Again, feel free to share our contact information as appropriate. One thing that I find is that sometimes people are more comfortable speaking privately for many reasons. So I always tell the audience that I'm going to stay after my presentation for anyone who would rather speak in a less public forum. That's something you're comfortable with, that's a great thing. And then the last reminder, and this is such an important one, remember that if someone shares information with you, you should not share that, even in a public setting. You should not share that information with anyone, right? They may have been public in this particular event, but it's not our role or your role as the speaker to share that with someone, that information with someone else. Okay, anatomy of a great speech. Introduce yourself. It's your choice what to share. As I mentioned before, as Shoshana reiterated, it's important to remember that you can set those boundaries. Today, at this presentation, are you a synagogue member? Are you a Sharsheret volunteer? A cancer survivor? A mutation carrier? A caregiver? Something else entirely, right? You can be three of those things and only decide that today you are one of those things. And develop a great opening. Share a statistic or fact. You can ask a question like we talked about on the last slide, or you can, like I said, share something. Did you know that 1 in 8 women will develop breast cancer in their lifetime? You can take simple steps to lower your risk. Did you know that? Or maybe you have a funny little cute, quick story you could share. I think people find it helpful to know what to anticipate. So share what you plan to say, like I did at the beginning of the webinar. And now it's time to get to the meat of your presentation. Depending on what the group you're speaking to requested, you might be introducing a topic such as genetics or caring for a community member who's been diagnosed. You might simply be sharing an overview of Sharsheret. You'll likely be sharing your own personal story or connection to breast or ovarian cancer or even a hereditary cancer mutation. And of course, again, you will be educating people about Sharsheret. How you do this is up to you. But you could weave your own story into the presentation, or you could start with your story and then talk about whatever else it is you plan to talk about. Same for information about Sharsheret. You could weave it into the presentation, or you could end with it. For example, when I'm asked to speak and not only talk about Sharsheret, but share my own story. I start out sharing my unique story, and then I talk about ways to mitigate cancer risk. And then I end by looping back to share how knowing my own needs actually helped me be diagnosed earlier than I would have been. And so it was life-saving. And that's why it's so important to take steps to mitigate your risk, including knowing what your own personal needs are. You should look to make the audience a part of your presentation. What might, again, this is part of that ask, what might they do this week after the presentation? Is it take a walk to get some exercise, schedule a mammogram, eat well, visit an ill friend? How might they get involved with Sharsheret? Is it hosting a parlor meeting, running with Team Sharsheret, having a family member make Sharsheret part of their bat mitzvah project, anything like that? And help them envision how they can become part of the story. Remember that not all Sharsheret stories begin with a diagnosis. Okay. We are going to shift a little bit because I know that some people here feel like they want to speak, and some people here feel like they want to have a conversation, and both are so helpful. So I'm actually going to ask Bonnie to take over the next few slides and talk specifically about what makes peer conversations unique and how to engage in them.
Thank you, Melissa. So another form of speaking on behalf of Sharsheret is not just speaking from, a podium or at a table or anything like that. There is also what we have peer support, where, like Shoshana mentioned before, we connect women one-on-one. So if a woman calls into Sharsheret and is looking for a specific form of advice, for example, if there's a woman who just got diagnosed and is about to go through a lumpectomy, for example, and wants to speak to another woman in her age range with a similar diagnosis and wants to speak about what it's like to undergo a lumpectomy and what that will look like, we can do our best. The social work team can do our best to connect you one-on-one with a peer supporter who can share their experiences about what they went through, to give you strength, to reduce that isolation, to give you that sense of support. And that peer supporter initially will be reached out by one of the social workers. So we have many different social workers, not just in New Jersey where I'm located, but from a national perspective as well. And a social worker could reach out to a peer supporter and say, hey, we have this woman, this is what she's looking to speak about. I think you would make a really good connection with her. Can I give her your name and phone number? If the peer supporter says, yes, that's great, I would love to tell her, how I went through things and things that worked for me, then we will make that connection. We will provide the woman that's calling in looking for support the name and phone number of the woman, of the peer supporter, and they'll make that connection. And like Shoshana mentioned before also, it's not a one and done. It's not like the social workers here are saying, all right, person A and person B, we're connecting you, and you're on an island on your own. We are going to follow up. We're going to make sure that that connection was successful on both ends, from the peer support end, from the caller, from the woman that's calling in. We're going to make sure that that connection was meaningful and successful. And in order to, let's say you are a first-time peer supporter, the social workers, when I say we, social workers, are going to provide you a peer support manual, which goes over the do's and don'ts of being a peer supporter. Do share your personal experience. Do share that emotional support. And as Melissa mentioned before, one of the biggest don'ts I tell all my peer supporters is we don't provide medical advice. You can share what has worked for you and for your well-being, but it's always up to the specific doctors, and you would encourage that individual that you're talking to speak to their doctors and say, this is what I heard, this new treatment or this new idea. What do you think about? Is this right for me? So we are, educating, we're there, the social workers are there every step of the way of that peer support connection. And that peer support connection really reduces, like I said, that isolation. Having a cancer diagnosis, whether it be from early diagnosis all the way through survivorship and at every and any point in between, is really overwhelming. And it's this new language that you did not expect to learn. And you want to connect with others. A lot of people want to connect with others who are going through a similar experience. So we definitely have that one-on-one ability. So, a peer supporter who is interested in signing up to be a peer supporter, they can always contact Sharsheret, and we can go into more information about sharing your story and how to become a peer supporter. And then there's these new additional ways that are somewhat new to Sharsheret. I'm not going to say brand new, but somewhat new. We have our Facebook groups where women are connecting one-on-one or even on a more national level with one another. So we have a Facebook group for women diagnosed stages 0 through 3, breast and ovarian cancer. It's a wonderful group moderated by another social worker. And like I said, women are asking their questions and posting things that have worked for them. I'm sure and I think I've even heard, maybe there are private messages going on between individuals that are on the Facebook group. And it's just another form of sharing your story, lending support, decreasing that isolation, and connecting with others who have been through similar experiences. In addition to our Facebook group, in addition to the peer support, we can also connect women one-on-one to hear the patient experience about medical providers. So this is not that we are endorsing or making referrals for medical providers, but part of the peer support network can include that women are sharing their patient experience about their doctors, their oncologists, their breast surgeons, things like that. If let's say a woman calls me and says, "Oh, do you know any information about Dr. So-and-so?" I could see if a woman is able to share her patient experience and connect women one-on-one, so that the woman who has had this patient experience can speak to another woman about her patient experience, good, bad, and different. Like I said, we don't endorse or make any referrals. I happen to see that there is a question about stage 4. So thank you for asking that. In terms of, and I'm sorry that I missed that. There is a Facebook group that I moderate for women who are diagnosed with stage 4 breast and advanced ovarian cancer. It is exactly the same as the earlier stage cancer, the earlier stage support group on Facebook for women diagnosed stages 0 through stage 3. And it's really, and I moderate this group. I run the Embrace program. That's the name of the program for women with advanced cancer. And women in the group are connecting with one another, getting support, sharing different things that are coming up. And we also, of course, do peer support for women with an advanced cancer diagnosis. So that in a nutshell is the goals of peer support from that level. So in terms of the peer support conversations, like I mentioned before, we don't provide any medical advice. We really leave that up to the medical providers. And you can, like I said, you can share what has worked for you and for your specific cancer diagnosis. But ultimately, everyone should ask their own medical providers prior to being connected with a peer supporter. Let's say I call a peer supporter and say, "Hey, can you serve as a peer supporter?" I'm going to give you some information about what the woman who's calling in wants to speak about, what her name is, her first name only, and so that you're not caught off guard, right? You want to be able to know that you can speak on this certain topic. Of course, if it's not a good time and you're not able to serve as a peer supporter, it doesn't mean we're never going to call you again. It just means we are completely understanding that life gets in the way and sometimes things are busy, and that's okay. Always follow the lead of the woman that's calling in. You don't have to share whatever you don't want to share. If there's something that you don't want to talk about, it's completely off the table, let the social worker know who's signing you up to be a peer supporter that you'll speak about X, Y, and Z, but A, B, and C is completely uncomfortable for you, and that's not in your wheelhouse, and you don't want to share that. That's okay as well. And it's always okay to set boundaries if something is making you uncomfortable or if something is triggering you. The social workers at Sharsheret are also always here to offer support in whatever that looks like. Maybe it stirred up some emotion, some things from the past that you didn't think was going to happen. That's okay, and we are fully understanding. And it may be that now you need some peer support. You want to hear somebody else's story about how, you know, they dealt with survivorship, for example, or something like that. So it's always okay to set those boundaries, to be able to identify those triggers and to reach out and get support from the Sharsheret social worker, whether it's a social worker that made the actual connection or the social worker that you've been in contact with throughout your journey. So that is, you know, peer support and sharing your story from a different way rather than getting up and sharing it to a group of people. Facebook and peer support is another way of lending that support and lending your story to others.
Thank you so much, Bonnie. That was incredibly helpful. So I was looking to make sure I didn't miss anything in the chat box while you were talking, and somebody asked what the goal of speaking was. Was it to help others or to promote Sharsheret? And honestly, the answer is yes. I answered her privately here, but I want to share with you that yes, obviously the goal is to help others, but Sharsheret can help others in additional, can help these people in additional ways. And so we want to remind you of just some of the ways that Sharsheret helps. Very often I'll start a conversation with someone I meet and say, have you heard of Sharsheret? Are you familiar? And they'll say yes. And then I'll do my presentation or my training or whatever I'm doing, and they'll be like, wow, I had heard of Sharsheret, but I didn't realize they did this or that or the other. And so I just want to remind you that we do this, that, and the other. And here are what those are. So you know we do peer support. Many of you have been involved with that. We have a peer support network, 20,000 women strong. And thank you for being a part of it. We have a genetics program with a genetic counselor on staff who answers questions about the need for testing or when testing might occur or how to interpret test results or sharing information about results with family members, things like that. Of course, you know we have an ovarian cancer program. All of the resources we offer for those facing breast cancer, we also offer through the lens of ovarian cancer. Our family focus program is for caregivers, whether that caregiver is a partner, a spouse, an adult child, a parent, a best friend. Not only do we provide these much needed caregivers with some support of their own, but we often throw in some tips about how to get your loved one to accept support. Our Embrace program, Bonnie alluded to, for women who are dealing with advanced or metastatic cancer, all sorts of amazing programs. Yes, some focus on end-of-life issues, but some focus on living well alongside cancer and are really joyful. Our Busy Box is for families who are raising young children while going through it. Child gets a huge box of age and interest related toys, and hidden underneath in a sealed envelope for the adults in the household is how to talk to children about cancer in developmentally appropriate ways. Our Best Face Forward kit is for those who are dealing with the cosmetic side effects of treatment. A box filled with phthalate-free makeups and lotions and brow guides and how to use that. And we also offer relatively recent, in just the last couple of years, some financial subsidies. So our Best Face Forward 2.0 actually provides money for non-medical expenses related to self-esteem, which is how it got the Best Face Forward 2.0 name. Money toward cold capping, which is something people wear to help reduce hair loss during chemo, the purchase and styling of a human hair wig, microblading, which is semi-permanent eyebrow tattoos, and three-dimensional micropigmentation, which are actually the tattoos for breast reconstruction. We also have, even more recently, something called a grant from Change Reaction, which is a one-time emergency grant for someone in need. Many people don't know we offer financial subsidies. And then we have our Thriving Again survivorship kit and so much more. So, and remember that everything Sharsheret offers is 100% customized, 100% confidential, and 100% free. Something that I hear, and I bet in your speaking about Sharsheret may hear also, is, I was aware of Sharsheret, but I didn't realize all you did. And I wish I had called while I was going through it, but I didn't want to take resources away from someone who needed it more. So I just want to clarify that needed it more is not a phrase in Sharsheret's vocabulary, right? We have never once in the more than 20 years we have been around said, I'm sorry, we've already given away 20 busy boxes this month. Your child will have to wait till next month. That doesn't, Sharsheret is for people who have a lot of support at home or who have no support at home. Sharsheret is for people who are uninsured, underinsured, well-insured. Sharsheret is for people who are struggling financially and who are comfortable financially. The support we give has to do with cancer and not need. So that's so important. So if you encounter that resistance, please let people know that that's not how we dole out support, that we are there for everyone. So we only have a few minutes left, and you're very often getting questions when you speak. So here are some frequently asked questions that we thought you might need the answers to. We're not going to have time to go through all of them. Maybe we'll put the answers in a follow-up email. One of the questions we get a lot is, why do we need a Jewish organization for this, right? There's so many great breast cancer organizations, and we know that's true because we partner with so many of them. But there are two things that make this situation unique. One is the hereditary predisposition to BRCA means that members of the Jewish community need to be medically managed a little bit differently. And the other is that anybody facing cancer, no matter what their identities, their communities are, deserves culturally meaningful support. And that kind of support has actually been proven to help medical outcomes. Some people ask where we're located. It doesn't really matter where we're located because we have administrative offices in New Jersey, New York, Florida, Illinois, LA, or California. We're about to start a pilot in Israel as well, and we have staff in Atlanta and lots of other places. But our support has been designed so it doesn't matter whether you are in a major city or a very small town that few people have heard of, you have equal access to it. One of the questions I get a lot when I'm out is, I know someone who was diagnosed, can I give you her number? And the answer is no, because we take privacy so very seriously. We will not proactively reach out to someone. But here's what you can do. If you know somebody who has been diagnosed and is interested in a connection, you can either give them Sharsheret's website or telephone number, and they can reach out themselves, or with their permission, you can make an introduction via email, but please do not do that without permission. I'm going to skip a couple of these, and I want Bonnie to hop on, because one of the questions I sometimes get when I'm out is, how do I become a peer supporter?
This is such a great question. So the way you can become a peer supporter is you can either call into Sharsheret at 866-474-2774. I will put that number into the chat box in just a moment. Or Melissa, if you want to, you can add that in as well. And you can email info@sharsheret.org, and you can say that you want to sign up to be a peer supporter, and one of our social workers, whether it's myself or one of our other social workers, will reach out to you to schedule a time to speak, hear a little bit about you and your cancer experience, and sign you up to be a peer supporter and tell you about the peer support network and how that works, and if that's something that you're interested in. If you're interested in becoming a peer supporter, we will go over the do's and don'ts with you. We will send you out our peer support manual, which has some role plays in it, and also goes over more in depth into the do's and don'ts. One caveat that I tell all the peer supporters once I sign them up is that it's a very personal situation, meaning there are some peer support matches that can be a one and done type of conversation, right? Somebody is calling in and they want to know about one specific thing, and then that's it. There are some who have 2 or 3 conversations. There are some who have built friendships. And there's no right or wrong, so to speak. There's no, I'm being the best peer supporter if I do X. This is more of just how how that peer support match kind of goes. And we've also found that sometimes, because we customize and tailor our matches so specifically and really as best as we can so that it is successful, a peer supporter can sign up in January of 2023 and then not be called until June of 2023. And it's not because you're not in our system. It's not because you're not a good peer supporter. It's really based on the women that are calling in and what they're looking to speak about. And we really try our best to, like I said, tailor and customize those matches in a very specific way.
Thank you very much. I'm going to do one more question because it actually, I should have done it already, and it actually popped up in the chat box. Somebody asked, I'm not Jewish, does that matter? So important. And I want to remind everybody that Sharsheret has resources for members of the Jewish community that they cannot find in relation to breast and ovarian cancer and genetics that they cannot find anywhere else. And we have a lot of them. But let me be clear that Sharsheret's resources are for anyone, regardless of religious affiliation and all of the other things, regardless of race and gender and religious affiliation. And we don't have a religious agenda, just to clarify also. So I would say somewhere between 1/4 and 1/3 of our callers have no connection to Judaism whatsoever. So it absolutely does not matter. Okay, with just a couple minutes left, oh, Bonnie, do you have something you want to add?
I do. If that's okay with you.
Yes, of course.
Someone sent me a question and I think it's geared towards you, Melissa.
Oh,
if you
okay.
are new to Sharsheret, is it appropriate to be a possible speaker?
I absolutely think it is. It depends on what you are comfortable speaking about. And as long as you're comfortable speaking, you're through enough of your process that you're comfortable speaking, then absolutely, it is absolutely 100% appropriate. Okay, so I think what I want to do now with the last 2 or 3 minutes we have is I'm looking for questions that have come up in, oh, I see, it came up. I'm looking for questions that came in. If anybody has a question that they want to ask, they can put it in the chat box now, and I will check when we're done with the slide. But I want to talk while you're asking questions about what might be next. So if you're interested in public speaking, we can send you talking points, and you can contact Sharsheret for help crafting a presentation or reviewing a presentation. You can wait for a call from Sharsheret to say, hey, we'd like you to speak, or you can be proactive. In other words, you can reach out to a local community center or your place of employment or a synagogue or any other type of place and say, hey, October is Breast Cancer Awareness Month. September is Ovarian Cancer Awareness Month. I'd love to speak to the group and help raise awareness. And then once they agree, call us. We'll help you. We'll send you fun giveaways and some resources to share. But if you do get a speaking engagement that Sharsheret hasn't connected you with, please let us know, because we keep track of that and we'll send you resources. Obviously, you can always connect with us with questions or concerns. And find other ways to help spread awareness, right? You don't have to be a peer supporter or speak publicly to do that. You can join one of our Facebook groups and share some strength and some, some of your story there. Answer questions from people who are not quite as far along in the experience, things like that. You can post on your own social media like Shoshana has. You can also get involved with Sharsheret yourself. One of the questions that I saw in the chat box was my granddaughter might want to make Sharsheret part of her bat mitzvah project. Yes, definitely. That's an amazing way to share awareness and to spread awareness and to support Sharsheret. And we have a person on our staff who deals specifically with that. So reach out to me. I'm going to put my email in the chat box and then just and I'll make the right connection. So my email is just mrosen@sharsheret.org. Sign up to be a peer supporter if you haven't yet. And like I said, join the Facebook conversation. And while we have our addresses up there, there were a couple of questions. So yes, as I said, September is Ovarian Cancer Awareness Month. And we know that breast and ovarian cancer are sometimes related, especially if there is a BRCA mutation. Somebody said to receive it, or even to a group. I'm interested in speaking. Sharsheret, should you receive a question? Oh, I see. Kansas City. Okay, great. We'll keep that in mind. Okay. I see that there are lots of, I don't see that there are questions as much as lots of offers to help. So let me tell you about one more next step. No later than Monday, you will receive a follow-up email. That follow-up email will connect to a couple of things. The ability to request a copy of, we're not posting this publicly like we do with many of our webinars, but you can request a link to a hidden link that will get you a recording of this. It will also give you the opportunity to indicate whether you're willing to speak and to request some resources to help with that. And connect to an evaluation. So that will give you the opportunity to share that you want to speak. And I also just want to remind you, yes, you can be a speaker even if your journey is not complete. I also want to just remind you that tonight was a webinar and a training in preparation for what is known as the Sharsheret Summit. I just put a separate website there, summit.sharsheret.org. With ovarian and breast cancer awareness months coming up, we have a huge burst of programming, including some amazing national webinars and hundreds of local programs across the country. So check that out and learn more about what's coming up. Okay, we're also going to save my last thing to say, because we are over time now, is I see that there were a lot of requests and offers in the meeting chat. We will save those and go through them tomorrow and reach out to you if you had one of those, if one of those was yours. I am going to stop my share. Thank you all for joining us this evening and for all you do to raise awareness and support those impacted by cancer. And Bonnie and I look forward to working with you in the future. Have a wonderful evening. Good night.